Welcome, folks. This is the Helm Weekly Call on Thursday, the 22nd of July, 2021. And we're going to start with the usual format. We're going to kick off with any, I've just forgotten exactly, any announcements, and then we'll go into discussions, and if anyone has anything to add. Now, we've quite a small crowd today, so it may not take all that long. But let's see how it goes. And I think we're outnumbered by Canadians as well, so that should be fun. Okay, let's kick off with the announcements. Our next, do you want to take that, Karina? Because did you put it in about the patch releases and so forth? You're on mute.
See, that's how I get out of actually talking, right? And just leave it on mute. No, I believe that Bridget probably put those there, or one of the mats, but the next patch release is scheduled for August 11th. So 364, if you want to look at the milestones there. And 3.7, so the release code is scheduled for August 30th. The release candidate, I mean. So definitely keep an eye on that date. And then Wednesday, September 8th is when 3.7.0 is set to release.
And that's going to be best case. Just in case we have to do a few iterations, it may go past that date.
Yeah.
Yeah. So folks, just keep an eye out if there's any particular feature you want to get into 3.7. That's a good time to go in. Otherwise, it'll be bug fixes into 3.6.4. Okay, any other announcements?
Schedule your travel now for KubeCon if you're going to go. Hopefully it'll still be in person. I know it's October, but I think everybody's super excited now about, in-person events. So
okay, and we're talking LA, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, that's all good. Yeah, we'd probably bring that up over the next month, I'd say, probably, or a bit later. We go around the block with that. Okay, into discussions. First one up is one I added. It's an issue. Its number is 9962. And what this is, the issue around this is, if you can take a look, is when you install a chart from a remote repo, should it get the latest version of dependencies? Yes or no? No. I think it should, but I would just like to get some confirmation on that. So, yeah.
I'm just reading through the issue here. So what's the command that they are running to fetch it?
So the person adds a remote repo. The person then installs the chart using the remote repo alias, and that chart has dependencies to Redis. And it's anytime he does an install, that's going to get the latest version of Redis that's supported. So why he's asking that question is, and I think that's the way it should work, but the person's doing a comparison. If you, instead of installing from the remote repo, they pull down the repo and then did an install, because when you pull down the repo, it's going to do a dependency update and get the versions of the dependencies at that time.
I don't understand how that would happen, because so when a chart.lock file is generated, the charts are then saved as part of the package itself. The only time an update should ever occur is if the user calls like a Helm dependency update, and that will rev to the latest version of that dependent chart and put it in the charts directory, and then as well it'll update the lock file. So if they're seeing differing
so
behavior
that's
from a Helm
so that-
install versus like cloning the repository and doing a Helm install, if the lock files are identical and if the charts inside of the charts directory are identical, then we shouldn't be seeing a repository update.
No,
Unless
I
they
think
added I think it's the Helm install -- dep up or dependency update flag. And then in that case, then a dependency update should occur.
no, I think that's working correctly. But let's say if you add a repo, Helm repo add whatever repo, this one's called Prometheus or whatever it is. I can't remember what it's called. And that person then goes Helm install, that chart from using the alias. Then every time it goes to do an install, it doesn't have any version of the chart.lock file. So it should go and get the latest dependencies. Isn't that correct?
No, because the expectation is that they should have the chart dependencies already installed in the chart itself. So they should have either done a Helm dependency build, which would have taken the existing lock file, if that existed, and pulled those charts down, or they would have done a Helm dependency update and it would have fetched the dependencies and put that into the local charts directory. So the idea is that you assemble the package before you go and install it, because again, we're thinking about this as like a package manager, right? We're trying to make it a self-installable package that they can go and take, and the existing resources and charts that are inside of the package, they can go and send that over to Kubernetes without having any requirement on the internet to go and fetch external dependencies. They should be able to say, if you have a package, you should be able to just go and install that. You shouldn't have to go and fetch additional dependencies to go and install.
And in addition, your charts are gonna have hard dependencies on versions. So in theory, once you already have that, it should never change.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you specify like a version range in your dependencies file,
right?
And then when you do a dependency update, it'll rev to the latest version.
Yeah, that's what they did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is a version range. So I must look in the repo. So if the packages aren't already pulled down in there and repackaged, then it is going to go and get the latest.
No,
because it's a version range.
No, so what I think the problem here is, and I think we can probably go and do a little bit further inspection, is that the package that is up and present on helm.pomeranium.io might have been updated before packaging and sending it over to the chart repository, either through CI or some other thing. And so when they called Helm package or they packaged it up and sent it to the chart repository, it could be different than what is currently in the Git repository itself. So that could explain the differences in behavior. I think what the
So they might have done a dip
is to try and figure out what causes the behavior between the two, because I don't think there is ever a time where if you try and call Helm install, it will update the dependencies behind you without you knowing what's going on.
Yeah, it must be referencing something. Okay, we'll dig a bit more into it and we'll see with the OC what exactly is going on. Thank you. Okay, anyone else on that? Okay, let's move on from that then. Yeah, we'll try and find out where exactly it's getting caught on that. Okay, so this is the one we've both been looking at, Matt.
Hey, Martin, really fast before you move on, I just wanted to capture who is going to investigate that further.
I can look at it and investigate further with I just wanted to verify something for myself on that, exactly what would happen. So yeah, I can look further into it. Yeah. So just jumping ahead to the next one. So Matt, I know you gave a very good answer on this, but I just wanted to put it in as a point of discussion. In that, so what the issue is, so the OC raised an issue where what happens if you define the namespace in your template, in your chart, and this is the namespace that you want to deploy your chart into. So normally how this works is, either the namespace is already available, or nowadays with Helm 3, you use the create namespace flag. I hope I have that flag right. I can never remember it. Now, we change in Helm 2 to Helm 3 a little bit of history because, that's how kubectl and Kubernetes normally works. It expects you to have the namespace prior to deploying. So that's why we went down this route. And also it's good practice to have the namespace there. So what the OC wants to do is they want the namespace, but also add customized labels to the namespace. So it's not just, create a default namespace off the cuff. They want the ability to put in the labels into it as well. It does create a kind of a chicken and egg situation where, Helm, I suppose, is expecting a namespace in there, and then you're trying to tell it to create a namespace, but then you have the definition of namespace in there as well. So, Matt, you want to pick up on that because you referenced something back to the classic days on this.
Yeah, this is a really tricky problem to solve. So there's two problems here, and partially this was solved in Helm 2. Well, not necessarily for the right reasons, and I'll kind of explain a little bit of back history here for Helm 1, Helm 2, and then going to Helm 3. So for Helm 1 and Helm 2, it was assumed that when Helm was basically a systems package manager, or if you think of a package manager like apt or something along those lines, you have to receive super user permissions because you're installing system binaries into the I think it's /user bin or not /bin, because I think that's your system bin utils. But basically you have to have super permissions to go and install in there. So the original assumption with Helm 1 and Helm 2 was that Helm would be a package manager to install resources as a system administrator. And to do that, at that time, the common convention was to use the kube system namespace. You can see now that there were a couple of faults with that assumption, because users would basically, because it was a gRPC API over the internet, and many people did not set up role-based access controls for the gRPC endpoint, which for everyone, that's totally fair. It's a confusing and difficult thing to do. And it was an additional endpoint into your Kubernetes cluster that other people could go and access over the internet and receive super user permissions. So this problem here, where they are trying to install a namespace with certain particular namespace labels and whatnot, this was kind of mitigated in Helm 1 and Helm 2, because the release record, or as in the way that you would track things like, did Helm pre-install hooks and succeed correctly? Did the resources install correctly? All of that information was stored in a release ledger that was stored in kube system. So it was not stored in the same release namespace as we do today. Now that assumption has changed in Helm 3 because people wanted to have their administrators wanted to be able to have it as a user systems package manager, where you could install it into a namespace, and then you could provide users with just access to that one particular namespace to go and install apps in there. You could do things like resource quotas and whatnot inside of your namespace, so then you can restrict what they can go and install. So with that assumption in mind, this particular case starts to break down, because we need that chicken and egg problem, right? Because we need to have the release namespace available, so then we can store the release ledger, so we can track information about that happens during the install. Otherwise, if we went and installed a chart and then we did a post or a pre-install hook and that failed, we wouldn't be able to record that information because we don't have the release namespace to store that information. So this one is a bit of a tricky problem to solve. And that's kind of why in Helm 3, we've recommended to move towards the kubectl approach, which is you should probably create the namespace ahead of time So then you can release those, or you can track those release records. You can install and attach metadata labels to the namespace. And it makes the whole administrative part of it where if you have two releases installed into the same namespace, they don't clash with each other in some ways. If one installs the namespace and then deletes that release, the other release will then be completely purged from the system because that namespace was managed as part of that Helm release chart. So there's a couple of problems involved here, like with global namespace or with globally scoped resources like namespaces. We've had the same problem with roles and role-based access control being installed through Helm charts. We've had like the CRD problem. That's the exact same case here, because you can have multiple different charts managing that same resource, and they can affect each other in adverse ways. So hopefully that gives a little bit of context here behind like some of the recommendations that I was kind of putting in that comment.
Okay, Matt. So I wonder, should we, if we're not going to go down this route, which, you know, as you've described there, is probably it. Like we've to, you know, follow the consistency we have with cluster-wide resources, like with CRs. Should we document this somewhere or add a subsection somewhere on this, or do we have this in already? That, you know, I suppose the recommendation is here is, you know, to manage the namespaces, basically, you're outside of the chart itself.
I mean, this is kind of like where other tools like Helm File become really useful and really powerful, because the idea there with those tools is that you want to be able to manage applications across multiple resources. And that's reverting back to that cluster package manager, because if you do a Helm File install, it will create the namespace however you want to configure it, and then it'll create all the applications inside of those namespaces. So if you're dealing with namespace management, that's kind of been our recommendation for people who are looking for that kind of use case. So we could document it and say, hey, if you're looking at managing namespaces with your releases and doing more cluster level management, then perhaps Helm File or other tools that are in this similar ecosystem would be more beneficial to help out in that case. The alternative is that we try and find some other workable solution for them. And I've seen some cases where people have been trying to install the namespace into one release namespace, kind of like Cube System or like Helm System, and then go and install the namespaces and the templates in another release. It comes a little bit tricky when you're trying to deal with like Cube clients because they're scoped to namespaces. But I've also seen other cases like that as well, and those are valid too. But I think that's more of, we need to figure out from the community how they're using that kind of information.
Okay, I leave that with you then, that particular issue to finish out.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if you guys had the chance to see, but right after you posted it, the guy kind of agreed with Fisher that, you know, they'll create it with kubectl create.
Okay, all right, that sounds good, Mark. Thanks.
I don't know if you had seen it. It was just after you posted, Martin.
Yeah, there's also some additional context here. There was a second issue that was also created that basically considers that the kubectl create is not a valid use case for that user. So maybe we have to have a different discussion to talk about that and see what other solutions that we can provide there, whether it's either we can support this and it's something that we need to accommodate, or try and attempt using other tools or something else.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the next issue. It's another one I brought up, and just rewinding our mind back to the feature that went in, it's probably about a year ago or longer now at this stage. I think it went in 3.2. Matt, is around the one where, you know, we could add the labels and annotations to adopt resources. So the idea behind it was that if you had an orphaned resources where the Helm release had disappeared, but the resources were still available inside the cluster from that original release, that you would be able to then adopt them with a new release. A couple of things on this. Number one, we still don't have a doc around this feature. So I'm not sure if Jerome is still available, is around or not. And then a bug seems to have come up. So I've pinged him on that because he may be best placed to answer that. And the last thing that I want to bring on it is that we have seen some issues around the labels annotations because they didn't appear to 3.2.0. So with migrated releases from 2 to 3, it sometimes has slashes in the code with it. So I don't know, is it a feature we want to go back to at some stage and revisit and see where we are with it, or are we happy where it is at this moment? I suppose that's kind of what I want to bring up here.
That's a good question. We've tried reaching out to Jacob a couple of times before, and he hasn't been able to, or has not responded. So if you can get a hold of Jacob to kind of talk about or talk through these problems, I think he would be the best person to identify that. Otherwise, we will probably have to go through the code again and review these use cases and these problems. And probably either come up with like a Helm improvement proposal to say the system needs updates and these are the proposals that we're trying to do for that, or try and reconsider those use cases and accommodate them with this feature. So
okay,
I'm kind of familiar with the code because I did review it, but it's been at least a year and a half since I last reviewed it. So there are a couple of like advanced use cases that Jacob would honestly be the best person to respond to those kind of comments.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I called him Jerome. Sorry, Jacob. Yeah, so yeah, all right. I'll reach out to Jacob and I'll see if he has got some bandwidth to look at this, because there's definitely a few things that have come up over the last while on this as well. Like, so yeah. I suppose if it's a migration thing, we hope, you know, fingers crossed, most people are crossing that threshold of the migrations at this stage. Okay, so while we're still on it, before I go on to the last two issues, we're looking for volunteers for next week for moderator, notes, and issue triage. So if you want to pop it into the chat, or you know, if you know someone who you're really friendly with and they'd love to do it for next week and they're not here, then yeah, you know, volunteer them up. You know, it's the best kind of volunteering. So yeah. Okay, moving along to, I'm going to hand over to Karina on this because she's got a suggestion around blogs and release teams for 3.7.
Thank you. So I was talking before about, so the release is a little over a month away, hopefully, right, if it stays on schedule. And I wanted to dig through and see if any themes are popping up so that we can write a blog for this next release. And I was wondering if anybody wanted to work with me on that, kind of going through the features that are in the list right now and, you know, kind of sort them into kind of different themes that might be popping up, make it easier for users to see why they really need to upgrade, or, you know, people that are using Helm. So.
Yeah, that's good feedback. I'm aware that like myself, Adam, and Butcher are reviewing the pull request that's going to update the Open Container Initiative experimental pull request. We're not sure if that's going to land in Helm 3.7.0 just because it's just so large. But that would be one significant feature and one good theme to kind of take a look through. Otherwise, yeah, I'd be happy to speak offline and see what other themes that might be emerging from different things here and there. Because I know there's a couple of things on the release milestone that many people have been asking for. So yeah, that'd be great this is a great initiative.
Awesome, thank you. And then we also kind of talked about, we're at the hour, but if those could lead into Helm 4 and what hips. So.
Yeah, I was saying that, Matt, that it might leave as a stepping stone for, I suppose we're going to have to sit down at some stage to see if Helm 4 is viable and are they viable features? Are the features there to make it a viable release? To put that time and effort into it. So I suppose it's something we need to think about going forward.
Yeah, the Helm 4 Helm improvement proposal, I can't remember which one exactly it is. It does call for call for a meeting to have that discussion on who should be assigned as the release maintainer for that. Try and figure out what features that we want to have for Helm 4, and then we can have that discussion there. So yeah, I believe Butcher would be the best one to respond to that, but I think it was in the fall is when we were going to consider calling that discussion. And I think that's called out in the HIP, but I can't remember exactly. So if we want to have that discussion, then that's a good place to start having that, and probably talk to Farina and Matt Butcher about that one particularly.
Okay, I think we'll all probably get pulled into that. And then FYI for all the non-North American folks, that is in autumn. By the way, I said I'd just throw that one in there. Do you use the fall or autumn in Canada?
We use both interchangeably, depending on who you're talking to.
Okay, fantastic.
Especially if you speak French, then you'll say,
Je ne parle pas, mon ami.
well, you can say automne.
Automne, I love it. Okay, we're just going to drop off, but a good call from Fisher there to can folks have a look at the Helm triage maintainer HIP. It's number 199 in the Helm community, and I think that's a good one. Call me on that one, Matt, actually, because I should look at that. If I haven't during the week, just I don't know, reach out to me or ping me or annoy me or whatever.
Yeah, this one would be great to go through, because we have people who would be willing to come as triage maintainers and be able to help us out on this stuff. So the quicker that we move on this one and come to a resolution, the quicker that we can sign on more people. So yeah,
I think it's a good idea. Yep, definitely. Okay, folks, anything else before we go? A little over the hour, but I wouldn't be Irish without things starting late and ending late. So there we go. Okay, thanks very much, folks. That's all for today, and we'll see you again next week. Same time, same bat channel.
Have a good rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Yeah, take care. Bye, folks.